Moving right along with today's show, moving now onto the state of Wisconsin in Green Bay, where we look at this Green Bay Packers team. The biggest change, the biggest shift that surprised a lot of people, I think, and definitely surprised me, was the shift that they had at the running back position. Obviously, last year with Aaron Jones and how really he finished off the playoff run that they had going there against the Cowboys, eliminating them and having a massive game in on that day. Then you continue it on with the San Francisco 49ers and how you were right there at the doorstep of upsetting the number one seed in the NFC, but you fell a little bit short. But I don't think it was for a reason of the running backs and Aaron Jones specifically. Then you head into free agency this year. Definitely surprised me by bringing in Josh Jacobs. Then with that, you kind of wonder where Aaron Jones is at, and he then is released and he signs with none other than the Minnesota Vikings. So those games are going to be even more entertaining than they are already. But with this new running back room now, with two fresh faces in there, other than A.J. Dillon, who was able to come back, this Green Bay team is looking at a new running back room that just poses the question to me how much better, I guess you could be with these new running backs. You hope to be better by bringing in Josh Jacobs, who had one of the better seasons a couple of years ago. Last year he was hindered with injury, but in 2022 he led the NFL in rushing, so he's expected to take the majority of the reps there as the guy for the Green Bay Packers. And according to their offensive coordinator, Adam Stenovich, he said that's good in all situations, referencing Josh Jacobs, mentioning how he's just good all over. He can block, he can catch passes out of the backfield, and obviously run the rock as well as anybody when he's healthy, as a point of emphasis. So saying that and emphasizing Josh Jacobs' health, now you move on to A.J. Dillon, bringing him back, being a different sort of runner than Josh Jacobs, just being more of a bruiser, short yardage situation kind of back. You know, every team has that running back that is just tough as hell, can really just do everything and get you those yards. But then also you look, not many people pay attention to the rookie that they drafted out of USC, MarShawn Lloyd, and bringing him in, it just goes over people's heads, really. You draft a running back in the later rounds, and not too much is expected of him, being a rookie and you have two pros there already at the position. Most teams run that 1-2 punch that everyone is starting to jump on the trend of. The Steelers, the Cowboys, to some extent, a little bit. That's what they've said. The Ravens have done it with a couple of running backs. The Commanders now with Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson. It is starting to become more popular, but it is interesting with the Packers having all three of these guys because Stenovich praised MarShawn Lloyd, the rookie that they drafted at a USC, because of his speed and vision. And more specifically, he described MarShawn Lloyd by saying, I would like to get Lloyd out there as much as possible. He's got a skill set that's a little bit different than AJ's as far as speed. He's not quite the bruiser that Dillon is, obviously, but he's got a different type of skill set. And he also added that just MarShawn Lloyd brings that explosive sort of element to their offense. And we saw last season how A.J. Dillon got 178 touches, a lot of them when Aaron Jones went down with that injury. And now with Josh Jacobs and MarShawn Lloyd there, how will this all look? How will the reps be divided? How will the carries? Who will be in on third down? Who will be in there on first and second down? All these sort of things, plus trying to manage the injury bug as well. How does this shape up for the Green Bay Packers? How good can they be? Well, I think just looking at this and how this team is sort of trying to build this new identity on offense. Last year, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon had 320 rushing attempts for the Packers last season. Plus, you look at all their other young wide receivers as well. Totals to about 7 skill position players that are available to Jordan Love. So that was one of their greatest virtue for the Packers, the young players that are breaking through and are playing very well to a lot of people's surprise. Now, in year 2 or year 3 for a lot of these guys, how do they build on that? And how do they change and try to integrate a guy like MarShawn Lloyd? Well, I think it's important for Jordan Love, really, which is the center point of this whole operation, kind of struck gold there with Jordan Love really panning out last year and how mature he looked in those playoff games. You obviously want to build this whole thing around Jordan Love, and you don't want to overdo it with getting him all these pass catchers and just throwing yourself out of these games, overdoing it with the passing game. You have guys like Jalen Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavion Wicks, Christian Watson, all young, exciting receivers that you want to get the ball to. But I think running the ball is just as much of an emphasis for Matt LaFleur, coming from the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay tree. They have so many coaches there that I'm starting to lose track of who actually was part of that tree and that coaching sort of cycle. But Matt LaFleur comes from that system with Kyle Shanahan. Running the ball is just as important as throwing it to all these world-class, exciting young wide receivers. And that's something I think the Green Bay Packers are trying to really emphasize here now. Having a great running back group, a room, will really set the precedent to opening up the field and getting it to these guys. The Jalen Reeds, Romeo Doubs, Dontavion Wicks, Christian Watson, all sort of look similar. Really mostly Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs. Dontavion Wicks is a bit longer, a bit lengthier, sort of like Christian Watson, but also they play very differently. I think they have a lot of variability on this team to get and keep really defenses on their toes, trying to get them to all these different playmakers. And it'll just open up the field if you can, one, hand it to Josh Jacobs or A.J. Dillon on early downs. Then maybe MarShawn Lloyd comes in there and just changes the whole dynamic of the style that the defense is accustomed to, sort of like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. David Montgomery is a punisher, runs between the tackles most often, gets you those short yardage situations. Then Jahmyr Gibbs comes in, he runs it to the outsides, he catches passes out of the backfield and just has blazing speed and elusiveness. I think the Packers are trying to take that note a little bit out of the Detroit Lions playbook and are trying to integrate it here. I'm a big fan of it. Now, how it actually all plays out, that's a different story with injuries and stuff like that, and just how teams are just more accustomed to the Packers now. They won't be as surprised by Jordan Love or some of these playmakers that they have. How they adjust to that will be a big reason as to how successful they are or how maybe lackluster this season could be for them. But I have confidence in them. Touching lastly on Josh Jacobs again, with bringing him in and signing that massive 4-year, $48 million deal for running backs, I think this really benefits him more than anybody on this offensive side of the ball, more than Jordan Love to some extent, because bringing him in, signing him for that amount of money, you obviously have some confidence in him to be the guy and tailor a lot of these carries in these games. By bringing him in, having A.J. Dillon there, having MarShawn Lloyd, you don't have to give him over 25 carries per game and just really run him into the dirt and just be running on fumes in Week 16, in Week 17, where you're supposed to be, oddly enough, feeling your best, playing your best football, and really having the most energy. This benefits nobody more than Josh Jacobs to try and get the best out of him and absorb the most talent and potential you can out of Josh Jacobs, giving him some rest, throwing A.J. Dillon out there, MarShawn Lloyd out there as well. You can still have a great running back for the amount of money that they paid by giving him some rest and not giving him over 20 carries per year. I mentioned before that's the idea that these NFL teams are sort of rocking with now. And the Packers are really going above and beyond and having 3 guys that they want to get involved. And I'm interested to see how it looks, how this all plays out for the Packers, because, again, I'm pretty high on the Green Bay Packers. I think last year they really impressed me, mostly on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively adding all these talents to their offense, to Jordan Love, and how Matt LaFleur uses them. I think he's going to go go to town on all the different ways he could use these guys, use their skill sets. They're going to be a team to watch out for. And I don't think, I'll leave you guys with this thought, I don't think it's too crazy to say in terms of quality, or actually in terms of quantity of skill-based players that they have on offense, they're right there with the San Francisco 49ers, who everybody thinks is the best team unquestionably in the NFC. In terms of the amount of guys you have on offense that you can get the ball to, they're right there with them. Now, how they compare in terms of quality, that has to be played out in the season and just stuff like that. But just the amount of guys that they have, they're right there with the 49ers, which is why I'm so high on them. But I'll leave you guys with that thought, and I will go into the last break of the show. And on the other side, we'll talk about a little bit briefly about the St. Louis campaign to try and get an NFL team there. There is a lot of buzz around football there, just not in the NFL. I'll talk more about it in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere.